All right.
I mean, they're all,
Yeah.
We're live.
We're live. Amazing.
Exciting.
Beautiful. In a professional setup, thanks to our sponsor.
Joey Gonzalez.
Yeah, Joseph Edgar Gonzalez, writer of Learning Data Science. A fantastic book, which you should definitely go buy. This week, we have an amazing podcast guest, Chung Min Kim. She is a second-year PhD student at Berkeley in Angjoo Kanazawa's lab and Ken Goldberg's lab. Mm-hmm. She broadly works on robotics, 3D computer vision, and scene understanding. Mm-hmm. And she did her undergrad and master's
at Berkeley.
Mm-hmm. So she's been here a while. I think we first met in my first year. You were still a master's student.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So long history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome.
How do you feel? Do you like this setup? Do you feel like a professional? You're on a professional looking podcast?
It feels really interesting.
Have you been on a podcast before?
No, of course not. Like, why would a normal person be on a podcast?
I mean, people want to learn a lot about NeRF and LeRF and whatever Garfield. All of your very successful past projects.
But I think people typically read the papers, not talk to the authors.
No one wants to read the papers, though.
That's true.
Yeah. I was in this is derailed already, but I was in a reading group today, and I don't know if the paper was, written weirdly, but we couldn't understand, the main argument was, there is this one line of thinking, a hypothesis of how networks learn. And we're saying that, it's actually, this different theory. We're posing this different theory and showing that, this is probably more accurate. But the theory sounded the same. And the experiments were, I could see this working for both of these theories, because they're rewording of the same thing. And, I don't know, 15 minutes into this discussion, I was like, why don't we just email it? They will definitely answer. I found that, you email first authors, and you're like, will you just explain your paper to me? And they're like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't believe someone read this paper. Thanks.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree that most people are, happy to talk about the paper.
Yeah. Has anyone ever emailed you and been like, hey, I really love your paper, I'd love to chat about it?
Not yet. One day.
I'm sure it's kind of...
Yeah, but I think most of the time it's just, asking details about the paper, which I guess is, kind of in their route, but not, chatting about it. Or, asking about, where is the evaluation code at? Please release.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff
I've definitely got a lot of that. Yeah. I started doing that recently. I need to do it more of, just emailing the authors and being like, hey, do you want to hop on a Zoom real quick? Because it's, also a good way to make connections. It is awkward, though. It's, especially if you read their paper and you understand it, then you're like, I don't really know why I reached out. This seemed like a cool paper.
Just invite him on the pod next time.
Yeah, I will. I'll invite him on the pod. But all right, going into some standard questions. You did your undergrad here. You did your master's here. Did you start research in your master's?
I was kind of doing research in undergrad. But I started in Ken's lab. And then, right after I started was, COVID hit. So I was removed for a long time. So I don't really know what I would call that period. I wasn't, quite doing research. But it's, hard to say I wasn't doing research. I was going in circles the entire time. And then I wasn't really, integrated with the rest of the lab either. So, and it's, a really big group, too. So I felt really lost until, I started my master's. And then I think I really had a really nice, research experience when I was, meeting with, other PhD students, other master's students, and, in person is really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember when you were deciding where to go for a PhD. I remember you were, correct me if I'm wrong, actually. You were between CMU and Berkeley. What made you decide to stay?
I think there's twofold reasons. I think personal and work. I think from a personal standpoint of view, I think I'm a very I think the weather here is so good.
That seems to be the deciding factor.
I think for me that mattered a lot because just never been on the East Coast before either.
Yeah.
And I know that I hate humidity. I know that I hate a lot of rain and snow. I also know that I don't really like being indoors a lot of the time.
Mm.
So that also mattered a lot. My family's also close by. I think that also mattered to me a lot.
Are they in South Bay?
They're in South Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you grew up in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area, and I know that if I say all of this like this, it sounds like a coddled South Bay student that doesn't want to leave the Bay Area.
Oh no.
Which is also kind of true, but I think I knew that from a personal standpoint, I wouldn't be as happy at least given the weather point of view. Not that that's the only thing that matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then
but I think from a work standpoint, I think I knew that I kind of wanted to also dabble into vision research at some point. And for that, I thought that Berkeley would be a better place for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that mattered a lot. And I knew that people were very happy at Berkeley. It seemed like people are very happy, people are very social.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to continue that for a while.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, it was a very emotional decision. I was very 50-50 until the last day, and then I flipped the coin.
Yeah.
I was also very 50-50 between Berkeley and CMU.
Yeah.
For me, my visit days were remote.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been to Berkeley in person and been to basically any of the other schools in person. So it seemed very risky to guess that I was going to like Pittsburgh when I had only seen it over Zoom.
Yeah. I mean, I know that people really like Pittsburgh. I know that the cost of living is really low. Yeah. So you can the rent lasts for a while, and you can also co-buy houses with other people. I talked to somebody briefly, and she said that she was taking flight lessons because she had a lot of money left over from
Wow, freaking ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah, it's really hard to imagine that with the Berkeley salary. I did very seriously think about staying for a while.
Yeah. So why a PhD?
It's fun. Or it was a very impulsive decision, I think, when I applied. I was I think the story goes when I just started my master's, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a PhD or not. I was heavily leaning against it. And then I think it was around the NSF deadline, and I was oh no, this is the last time I can ever apply to the NSF because the master's somehow is considered a terminating degree or something. I don't exactly remember the mechanics of it, but it seemed you couldn't apply after your 5 years. Because it wasn't a joint BSMS program.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was okay, if this is the last time I can ever apply, then I might as well apply now. And then after that, I was oh, I have the essays anyway, so might as well apply to PhD programs. And
yeah.
I got lucky.
Yeah.
And I was oh, might as well do a PhD because, it's all set up.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I wanted to do it. Yeah.
Has it lived up to your expectations? Is it as fun as you thought it would be? Or?
Yeah, it's fun. I think I really like meeting the people. And I think it's a very dramatic environment where a lot of things happen and a lot of things change every month and every year.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I could have expected the same from a full-time work environment.
Yeah.
I feel a lot of people get really sad working. Or maybe this is a biased experience, but I think the happiness is very bimodal. They either find a lot of fun outside of work, so they're really happy, or they think their work is boring and they wish that they went back to doing a master's or something.
Yeah.
I think I would have been the latter.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that the average, a higher percentage of PhD students are happy compared to people in industry?
Not necessarily. I think happiness calibrates with time, right? You're always at your average happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the people who are working here seem at least happier with what they work on, which is also taking up a huge portion of their day instead of... Yeah, although I think we know their salaries are not great, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
And our happiness outside of work is not money driven.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or like I remember saying, like somebody was saying, like, oh, like he went to his like friend's apartment, and then they had like the apartment had like a really big like hot tub and like stuff like that. And I was like, can't imagine that here.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Interesting. I feel like my impression, which I only worked in industry for less than a year full time, and it was remote. But I guess my impression was that the average person in the industry is maybe happier. But I do agree that like it probably from like a work satisfaction point of view, like satisfying with like what you built. PhD might be a bit higher. Or my perception could be wrong.
No, I think they might be happier. I think it just seems to depend a lot on the person.
What's your take, Connor, as someone who was actually in an industry for a while?
Yeah, I think like people's satisfaction with the work is a lot higher in the PhD. I think part of it is like you really have a lot of ownership over the work. Like in most cases, like it's entirely your ideas and you're the one kind of doing everything. Whereas in a big company, like you're working on a small fraction of a very large thing. It's harder to see the like impact of it, like feel ownership. I do think like in industry, maybe people had like more hobbies going on, or like more stuff going on outside of work. But just kind of on average, a lot of PhD students I think also have fun hobbies. Not a lot of pilots though.
Sort of thing. We do know one.
One pilot.
Yes. We know one pilot.
Shreyas or
Frank?
Frank also.
Yeah. Wait, is Shreyas also a pilot?
Yeah.
Wow, 2 pilots.
Yeah.
Are they like loaded?
I think Shreyas saved up for like a long time. Fly or something. Yeah.
Frank was in industry before.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Makes sense. So I have a list of questions. So do you feel like I also did my undergrad here, and I felt like my experience going from undergrad to grad school was like my PhD. I felt like was basically what I expected, and that it was like not that different from my undergrad experience.
Yeah.
It sounds like you may not.
No, I mean, I personally have a different experience. Yeah, I don't agree, but no, I think when I started my undergrad, I was like mostly taking classes. I didn't do that much research.
Yeah.
Until that COVID time. But like even then I wasn't like really doing anything for a long time. And I definitely always felt swamped by classes. I think I had like a very typical Berkeley undergrad life.
Yeah.
Where you're always taking like 18 plus units and like you're always like doing homework all the time, and like whenever you're hanging out with your friends, it's always to do your homework or like it was always, and I never felt like I was like learning for the sake of like research or for like learning for the sake of learning. I wasn't like as excited to like dig into something.
Right.
And I think I didn't really have the space to do that, like temporal time to do it.
Yeah, no, Berkeley's good at spending a lot of your time trying to get the grade.
Yeah, and like I feel like that vibe is very different than my PhD. And I mean, even in my master's, I didn't feel like I had like the time to like work on to something. Like, always felt like I was in a rush, and I feel like it is like for the first time in PhD that I don't feel that way.
It's very nice.
It's nice.
And then, do you feel like staying at Berkeley has helped at all with like, oh, did our camera fall? Nice.
That's all.
Wow, amazing. Your setup wasn't as good as we thought.
The camera's really cool.
Yeah, it is. Joey knows how to. I feel like Joey needs to become more of a content creator, and I think we just need to push him. Like,
I thought the Skylab was talking about like a TikTok at some point.
We do have a TikTok.
They're not that active.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time to produce TikToks, like per per minute of content produced, it takes a lot of like
Yeah.
editing time.
I feel like when we started, it was like, and really cranking them out. But then the more you do it, the more you're like, oh, I should probably edit this. Like, probably
Yeah.
Yeah. And you could always do like a day of her life. A day in life of like some person.
Yeah. Yeah. We should probably start it back up, you know, get the younger audience. But
if you're a TikTok user and you're watching this podcast, let us know.
Yeah, exactly. We need to clip parts of this and put that like alpha male podcaster background music. I've heard that.
I have not.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm on TikTok too much. What was I talking about? Do you feel like doing your master's here, like research, and not just like you did research in your master's, you did it like in the same lab. Your research direction was a bit different.
It changed a lot.
It changed, yeah. Do you feel like staying here kind of helped you like sort of like hit the ground running?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I think I was doing robotics, grasping related stuff in my undergrad and my master's, and it was something I wanted to try something new in my PhD because I also knew that I had more time. But I also had a lot of stuff going on in my first semester as a PhD student here, so I also
like
I had like a lot of personal stuff happening during that. So I didn't like immediately hit the ground running, but I think in some way I was able to. I knew the people.
I think we can tighten it, right?
Yeah, it's definitely falling over time.
Do we know how to tighten it?
Like that?
Yeah, I think we need to make it for level though. Right. It's kind of convenient that they have a level. Okay, that's something, I think.
All right.
Beautiful. But sorry, continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did hit the ground running as much as I could because I already knew the people here, and I think my first papers in my PhD was with the people I knew here. So I already had a rapport going on.
Do you think that it helped with like imposter syndrome or not really?
No, I think that's independent. Yeah.
How are you doing with the imposter syndrome in this stage in your PhD? You're past it or not yet?
Not yet. I think a lot of my works have been like collaborations, so it's like very like, and I feel like I'm definitely like a better collaborator than like a solo creator. And because I think as like a single person, I always go in circles, and I think that's less true as collaborator. But like that always makes me think like, does this mean like I'm not like a good researcher?
Yeah, I think it's a style. People are team players. People are solo.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in general, it's pretty like encouraged to have collaboration, right? But I guess you have a lot of co-first author, like collaborations.
Yeah.
And I get how that, like, I've had that a little bit of like, a lot of co-first authors like can sort of lose your identity a bit.
Yeah, but it's fun. I think it's a question of like, do I want to keep? I really like collaborating with other people, so maybe. Yeah, it's not something I have like figured it out yet. I think my goal is if I keep collaborating with like different sets of people and I keep doing okay, then maybe it means I'm just a good collaborator person. But
so what's that? It's like the fun way to do research. It's like working with different people really closely.
Yeah, and I'm doing it for the fun. Because one day all of this work might be useless.
That's so true. And ML that day could be 2 months from now.
Yeah. I had like a whole. When Sora came out, I was just also thinking about that.
Oh yeah.
Or like these video diffusion model stuff too.
Yeah. Keep adjusting, but
I'm gonna get it perfect.
Yeah. So when's that solo author paper to drop? Solo first author.
One day,
One day.
Totally solo author. No.
Just you.
But I feel like that's also never gonna happen. I feel like it's really hard to tell the difference between like solo or like if I'm like working closely with other people, right? Like when do you know if those people should be like co-first versus like not co-first?
Yeah.
And I think that's also hard.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, like I've definitely had the opposite, seen the opposite case where there's like, it's co-first author, but like really one person is like calling the shots. But the other person, like there's a question of like, if you're both spending all of your time on this, but one person is clearly in charge.
Like the project lead versus like the author kind of shit.
Yeah, it's like, do you do co-first author? Because it seems weird to like spend all your time on a project that you're second author on.
Right.
But also like one of the first authors seems to be the one who's like really like if you were to think like, oh, this is so and so's project.
I think that's one big problem. Like if you have a project that needs a lot of people, but like it doesn't really make a lot of sense for people to spend all their time on something that, like they aren't a first author on often, at least like more senior people.
Yeah.
For me in general, like I like to like plan a project with like who's gonna lead it up front.
Yeah.
So it's not like a surprise for anyone that like where they'll be on author order.
Have you ever been in situations where the author order was like kind of unclear or there were like arguments over author order?
I don't think we've had like an argument over author orders, but I think there hasn't been like that much problem so far. I think, but I think there's always like a question of like how many co-stars or like if like the project dynamic changes a lot over like the course of the project.
Yeah.
Then like who is like the author, stuff like that.
It like comes up with like resubmissions a lot, where like one person like wants to do the work of resubmitting it, and then it's like the other person doesn't work on it in a year or something.
Yeah.
The only time I've had a paper where the author order was like, it was just very last minute. It wasn't like contentious, but it was like the deadline was at midnight, and like 11:30 p.m. We're like, okay, we're gonna submit it. And we had not talked at all about like who was what author, and it like we all just ended up being co-first author, basically, like all the students. So like, damn. But it was like very funny. Like it's like so last minute.
Yeah. I feel like author order is one of those things where like 99% of the time, even if you don't talk about it, like it is never really a problem, right? Like usually the first author is like pretty clear, and then like you put me as third author instead of fourth author, like
no one cares.
It's like no one cares about that shit.
Yeah.
But having been on a lot of co-first author papers, what do you think are like important things to do? Like, how do you communicate with your other first authors? If it is like truly like co-first author, like if you have conflicting ideas, like what do you think are the keys to having a successful co-first author paper?
Trying to figure out if we ever had like really big conflicting ideas.
Oh damn. Okay, so
but I think like in general, like for both NeRF and Garfield, I think a lot of the key ideas were like set out from the beginning. And then it was mostly like refining it. So like it wasn't like any of the key ideas were being changed. I think we were always, it is very weird or fortunate. I think it's just like none of us I think had like big fights.
Still time. Lots of PhD.
Right, exactly. It's time to search it up.
Yeah. But it's hard to imagine that like a project direction would change so much. It definitely does change a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it obviously depends on the project. I feel like if it's like a continuation project, there's probably a little bit less like questions about it. I've definitely had projects or I've had a project that I'm thinking of where like it's not like there was a disagreement on like this argument is wrong. It was just like we both found different things interesting, and like kind of close to the deadline, they just ended up being 2 different papers.
Like what was like the main focus of the project?
Yeah. Like one of them was focused more on like the systems aspect. One of them was focused a bit more on like the scheduling, more like theory part of it. And it was really awkward because like we shared all the system components. Like a lot of it was like the system itself was the same, but one paper was claiming like this is the contribution is the system, and which like really weakened the other paper's claims. And then it's like you are doing all this new systems techniques, but you're submitting the papers at the same time, so you can't be like we follow whatever at all because they're concurrent.
Just put it on Arxiv and then cite
Right,
it.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
The only time I've had like differences of opinion like that was like we were on the same page with the ideas, and then like some of the ideas got scooped, and we kind of disagreed on whether it made sense to pivot it or like just like, oh well, it's like scooped.
Yeah, I think we also had something similar where we were working on the Garfield stuff for a while. Or not for a while, but we were like definitely solidifying like what we were gonna do. And then I think we found a paper on Arxiv that does like basically like one of the components that we were gonna do. And then we were like, and I think for a while we were like, is this like a main contribution or is this like not a main contribution? And then I think we ended up like minimizing it a bit as compared to like the other points.
So speaking about related work, I would say of all the PhD students I know, you're like most on top of like reading papers. You're like,
I feel like that must not be true.
I know it's definitely true. I feel like I mean maybe you don't like fully read them all.
Yeah, I don't.
For the viewers who don't know, we sit next to each other, so like I see her.
Yeah, but
Well, we also sit next to each other. That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
You're the glue.
The glue that combines.
So we basically sit next to each other.
Yeah.
Right, by training. But I feel like I definitely, and I think a lot of other people kind of in waves will like go through like I will actually go seek out like what has been happening. But then I'll have just like exploit phases where I'm like weeks at a time, I will be like do not read papers, don't really go looking for papers. I feel like you've even sent me multiple papers, and I was like, oh damn, I didn't even know that existed. I guess what, like, in a week, how many papers do you think you like skip, like even just like read the like title or like read like the abstract?
I think this is like a hard question because I have like 3 tabs open with Archive.
Okay.
I have 3 Archive tabs open. One for CV, one for graphics, and one for robotics. And like basically every other day, I refresh all of them. Right. And then I just scroll through them and being like, oh, like does this sound interesting? Or like I click some of them. I look at some. I don't even bother looking at the abstract. Sometimes I just click on I just look at their figures. Right. And
truly a CV student.
Yeah, at this point, I feel like I know that's like a terrible discriminator most of the time, but I look at the figures, and if the figures are good or bad, I use that to determine if I should read them.
I think that's totally fine.
Yeah. I mean, I think I do this for like maybe like 4 or 5 papers at least a day, and it's like unclear how many of them actually end up mattering to me.
Sure.
So, and it definitely math changes a lot based on like if it's like right around the conference time or afterwards. Like I know that in like 3 weeks or 2 weeks, now that the ECCV deadline has passed, there will be more papers coming out.
Yeah.
And the papers I will probably be more excited about. I think there's like sometimes like dead phases like the summer or like the December.
Yeah. So I would say that's a lot of papers.
Yeah, but I think there's a large quantity of papers. That
Right.
doesn't mean that there's a large quality of papers.
You're a breadth first search kind of gal.
Well, no, I think not all the papers on Arxiv are. Trying to figure out if this is like a controversial take, but I feel like there's too many papers.
Give it. I would love a controversial take.
No, but I feel like there's a lot of papers in Arxiv that are not good.
I don't think that's controversial at all.
That's not controversial at all.
And I think a lot of there are some titles that are more clickbaity and like overclaiming than they should be, especially in the vision papers. And I click them, and then I look at it, and I go like, "This is like specifically constrained to this one field, and you're making a big grand claim about what it does."
We've solved all of computer vision.
Yeah. Or when you read the paper and it's like just clearly not well written, or like the idea is just clearly not well presented, and it's very discouraging to read a lot of papers like that sometimes too.
So I guess like I sometimes when I'm in this explore phase of like reading prior work, I do get a bit of like sometimes a bit of anxiety over like if I'm working on a project and I'm reading their prior work or like, you know, looking through prior work, I do have that like, oh no, like what if I come across my idea? Like not my idea, but like that.
Like you realize that you've been scooped like a few months ago or something.
Yeah. So do you ever have this feeling, or do you feel like because you do it so routinely?
Yeah, I think the reason I do the Arxiv is also because of that anxiety. Like, I think like the worst feeling is like when you've like finished basically writing your paper and you're like finally like, okay, I'm gonna do my related work now. I think I did my related work like a few months ago when I started this project, but hopefully I've been not scooped yet.
Yes.
Or like, I also know a lot of people that just don't like looking at Twitter because they're like stressed that they haven't scooped.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like delaying your stress, right? Might as well. Like, I don't know what the right idiom is here, but like, if you're going to be scooped, might as well realize that you've been scooped earlier than later.
Yeah, save yourself some work.
Yeah.
I don't get scooped often because it has like in ML it's very extreme. There's so many papers coming out. The only area I work in that has enough papers coming out to get scooped sometimes is CRDTs. But on the like databases side, I think it's very rare. I was talking to a speaker today who does like a mix of theory and systems, which is like one of the great things about doing theory and systems. It's like you're never going to get scooped. Like there's like nobody else working on like this combination of things in this specific space.
Yeah.
Oh, that was funny. Do you find yourself as someone who's like very up on literature having to break the news to people when they present an idea that you've seen another paper that does it already?
I mean, I think most of the time that's not true. I think most ideas end up either I've seen something similar, but they're not as executed well, or this is like a new idea and it's like really nice. I think I haven't seen like a problem like that much.
Really? So you've never have you ever run into that where you're like, you should check out this paper?
Sometimes, but like not in my recent memory.
I see. So you say you scrape Arxiv, which I would say is like really getting to like in terms of like the filtering state, like people put kind of everything.
Yeah, but I think the thing is like looking at Arxiv is like good because if you look at only the Twitter, then like what happens is like you always get like overwhelmed by all the LLM stuff or like all the flashy looking stuff, and you only get like maybe like 2-3 papers out of it a day.
Right.
And it's like you know that the other people will also be looking at that. So and you all really don't need like that long of a time on Twitter to understand like which papers are people looking at right now.
Right.
So I think it's like good to look. It also doesn't take that long to look at Arxiv, right? I think like maybe like 10 minutes a day.
I'm gonna be honest, I've never done it. I've never just like scrolled through what papers have been uploaded today.
I also don't do that. But I'm thinking maybe I should.
Yeah, I'm thinking if this is like not that hard, maybe it's interesting.
I mean, I think it's also like nice looking at the titles. It's kind of amusing.
Yeah, I was like doing this for a while with the Hugging Face like papers, you know, like the AK stuff. But like it feels similar to Twitter in that there's like a strong selection bias here.
Yeah. I mean, the ones that you see on Twitter are the ones that a lot of like the AKS people present. Yeah, but I think one pro for Arxiv is that sometimes there's like really interesting paper titles. Like I saw one about like check-in tracking. That was pretty funny. There are some like interesting titles. I forget off the top of my head, but there was like one that was called like the band like Raging Against the Machine, but there was Raging for the Machine. That was pretty good. Yeah, stuff.
Did you send me? There was some paper on like using video of people to like detect if they have autism or something. There was some like weird paper.
I think I remember we talking about this. There are some crazy papers on it, which is, I mean, it's really not weird to even call them papers because anybody can post stuff on Arxiv.
Right, yeah.
Well, not anybody. We've had papers.
Yeah, I've had, we tried to upload a paper that got rejected.
Oh, by Arxiv.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but it was actually, I do know Jennifer Listgarten wrote, okay, maybe I won't share why she wrote it, but wrote a paper on like why you can't just use AI to generate training data for like scientific models. Great paper, well written. It was like accepted into an actual journal, but got rejected from Arxiv. Oh, and I didn't know, I didn't realize Arxiv rejected our joke paper that was like had, I'm sure, copyrighted images in it. Like maybe that was.
I know David's got a paper that's not officially rejected, but it's been like blocked by Arxiv for months.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to know what their criteria is.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it just like one person like somewhere like sitting down and doing this?
I thought it was all AI, but I don't know what you know. But maybe
who runs Arxiv? Is it a nonprofit? Is it?
I know Cornell.
Professor,
right? Didn't Cornell start it?
Like some professor at Cornell just goes through the Arxiv posts and checks.
Look at it.
Yeah, I think we talked about this at some point.
I think Cornell also made the Bird database. So
what did it?
The Audubon. It's like they like a list of every bird and like what they look like. You know. So
that's cool.
In the community, Cornell. Shout out to Cornell.
Shout out to the Caltech Birds database.
That's also true.
Yeah.
Caltech 101.
Yeah, Caltech 101 had birds, labels, and segmentation. Didn't they also have key points?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they know what's up. Right, who made Arxiv?
So how did you get into like machine learning and robotics and stuff? Did you always like this sort of stuff?
I think doing robotics was like I think in my undergrad I was doing like Mickey and CS, and I think on like one of the years, like on a whim, I was like, oh, it would be really cool to try research, and then I was like thinking like, oh, it would be cool to do robotics. I think it was like a very unstructured chain of thought, and then I ended up in Ken Goldberg's lab, which was doing kind of like this intersection of like also robotics and ML stuff as well. And then that's how I got the introduction. And I think a lot of people at Berkeley are generally interested in the circle I was in, like ML stuff. And that's how I got into it.
Makes sense. Do you actually work with like physical oral robots at all?
We do. I think I was saying I haven't touched a robot in a while.
We recently had Ale on, who also does robotics.
Oh, yeah.
And I was shocked to learn that it's not all physical robots. Like, it's a lot of simulation and stuff.
Yeah, I think he does a lot of like stuff with simulation, and then there's a lot of people that do like sim to real learning, where a lot of the robots are like trained in sim and then transferred to the policies are transferred to real. A lot of like robot dog research, that's also locomotion stuff. That's also a lot in simulation as well.
Do you have a take on how long it'll be before robot dogs replace real dogs?
I think robot dogs aren't as cute as real dogs, you know.
But like that can be fixed, right?
I feel like a lot of. I think it just needs to look cute. It needs to look furry and needs to be like less predictable.
But you can get really good data on like what kinds of dogs people think are cute, and like generate like, a really perfect cute dog.
Yeah, I think I was actually really interested in this for a while. From a personal standpoint.
This sounds right. This sounds in line with your personality.
But like I saw these like I think these like Japanese companies that have like robot pets, like the dogs and stuff. And they have like really cute faces and like people get like really attached to it. But I think a lot of it is like about like how the dogs react to you. But I think one con of it is that they will always react the same. Because like it's like to an extent programmed to be that way. Yeah. And so like if they always react to like you giving them a treat like the way same time, like it's very possible for the person to get bored. They don't necessarily like grow with you.
Just change the temperature in the model.
Yeah.
Or sample.
Yeah. Maybe you can have an LLM prompted to act more like a dog, and they'll woof a different way, and they'll be fine.
Damn. I mean, I'm sure it's maybe not the highest priority.
No. But...
What's the story with Arxiv?
Yeah, so Arxiv was created by this guy. Sorry. Paul Ginsparg. Ginsparg.
Right.
Ginsparg. American physicist.
American physicist.
He did his bachelor's at Harvard, where he created what is now Arxiv, called something else. Then moved to Cornell for his PhD, and that's when Arxiv actually took off. Now Arxiv is owned by Cornell and hosted by Cornell, so it's Cornell.
It's like the alternate path to Mark Zuckerberg, who like was at Harvard and made Facebook.
Right.
Instead, this guy made Arxiv.
Dude, I feel like Arxiv is much better than Facebook.
I'm sure like
it's gonna last longer.
Satisfaction ratings would be way higher for Arxiv right now.
Yeah.
Than Facebook.
It must be a lot of data that Cornell is thing. That must be a lot of money.
Yeah, they must have funding from somewhere.
Yeah, I think it always says like it has funding from like Simon's Institute and all those. I forget it.
Yeah, I think it's funded. I think Berkeley funds part of it too. Yeah, but
you could have one like big academic project like that, like infrastructure for academics in Arxiv. Do you have an idea of what it would be? Like someone gave you like $500 million to like have something be built.
Like a really nice paper recommender system, but I feel like that exists, right? Or like give me like a. I know that this exists if you like search it on Google, right? But like something like what are like the 10 most important papers I should read for like this field? Then like some blog post will be like, oh, like these are the 10 papers that you should read, and these are the summaries.
Wow. In my field, they do not have blog posts summarizing the 10
papers. But like,
so you like add to the Wikipedia, right?
Yeah, so like that would be really cool if that automatically that existed.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah. I know the connected papers is like, given the paper, it can give you like N related papers.
Yeah, I really like that.
Those are paid services that are
Yeah, but they used to be not paid at some point.
I don't. Oh, they paid now? I use it all the time.
Or I think there's like a limit on how many times you can call it.
I guess like just 5 times a week or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I used to like use it a lot for like really weird stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And now it's harder.
Yeah, it really helps with the exploit phase.
Yeah.
Yeah. But talking about products, you work, well, I guess maybe not directly, but NeRF Studio. Maybe we should explain what NeRF is in a second.
I don't know what NeRF is, so explain it to me.
Yeah, actually, let's explain it now. Can you explain what NeRF is? Because I cannot.
What is a NeRF? you put it
to a database theorist.
Okay.
What's the objective?
The objective is that given a set of images as well as their camera poses, you want to reconstruct what the world would have actually looked like from like the different view. So let's say like I have these two views, and then I want to know like what it looks like in the middle view, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you do this? You basically ask a neural network to learn this function, learn it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So it's like an app, like you just take pictures of a room and you're like, give me the reconstruct the thing. Or what's the open source one?
What?
The NeRF Studio is like a
Yeah.
application for this.
So I don't know if NeRF Studio is the one that does this, but like Matt, one of the authors of the original NeRF paper, I remember I went to Paris with him for. I don't think you were.
He was there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't think you were there for this. We went to the catacombs, but we were there for a conference, and Matt was there. I went to the catacombs, and I was like, oh, all these cool skulls and stuff. And Matt also thought this.
Yeah, he just scanned the skull.
Yeah, he just whipped out his phone and just did like this sort of action, and then 3D reconstruction just a short while later. And I feel like you guys do that a lot. You guys are the most fun because close to deadlines, Angjoo will like buy a box of donuts.
Oh yeah,
and be like, let me reconstruct this.
Oh yeah, we scanned a donut one time. That was fun.
Yeah, but so that's NeRF. In I guess a very small nutshell.
In a very small nutshell, I think like the truth is like you in this like 3D space for every pixel, for every point you want to learn like the color and the density, and then you supervise it by like with the 2D images using volume rendering, where given an array you like look at all the points and then their colors and densities and you accumulate it. But I mean, I think in a nutshell, it's like images and their poses and 3D reconstruction.
And so, NeRF Studio is. Can you explain NeRF Studio?
NeRF Studio is an open source project where there's like a really nice repo of NeRF code base where a lot of the stuff that people work on, like for example, for like the sampling part of it, or like the network part of it, and the rendering part of it, and it makes it really, it's like Lego blocks for NeRF research. So it's very easy for people to like change stuff or like swap it out for other stuff or like use it for like other downstream tasks. So to like accelerate NeRF research, and also for like people that want to use it in their products and cost you to license them. And it has a lot of stars in GitHub, which is exciting.
How many stars?
Something on the order of 1,000 or something thousands, which is great.
Amazing. What is like? How popular is NeRF?
I mean, people have used it for ads, and I understand. I think people have used it for like VFX stuff, and like I think maybe also a movie. I forget. I think somebody famous used it in like a music video.
Oh, really?
I remember somebody mentioning it.
Wow,
Dang.
that's pretty cool. Good. No one's using my stuff in music videos.
Same.
You can do 3D.
We can be the first.
Yeah.
Do like how big is something that I don't have a good gauge on because I'm not in 3D. It's like how big is NeRF in the 3D research world? Like how much 3D research is like NeRF related?
Some parts are. I think there's like I mean, there is a lot of stuff like point clouds, meshes, and SDFs, all the like. Especially for like, I think SDFs, they're still like very useful for like collision detection and like navigation and stuff. But I think there has been like this growing field of like this like differentiable rendering based like implicit methods. Like the NeRF stuff, I think has gotten more popular, but I think it's stuff that like comes and goes. I think there's like Gaussian splatting that's also come out a while, and that's also gotten very popular. And I mean, I think it's still like a small portion, but it's like a growing pie in the pie.
I mean, obviously, it's popular enough to have a open source toolkit with thousands of GitHub stars.
I think it's like differentiability that's like really nice because you can use it to like for just like 3D generation methods because you can back like the Dream Fusion style stuff too.
So I guess from like an external person, I've seen, a fair amount of NeRF studio presentations. I'm a bit jealous because y'all always have like really nice videos, like for your past project, NeRF and Garfield, which do you give like a super high level overview of what those sort of are?
That's a really great question. I'm really bad at presenting, but I will try my best. I think so. What I just said earlier about like given like 2D post images, you can reconstruct like a 3D scene. And what I said by that is like every point can learn like color and density. But what we also care about in these two works is learning like a secondary feature, like a semantic feature, which you can like say like this is like a bottle of Coke, or like this is like one object, stuff like that. And there's like a growing field of research that is like looking at feature fields where the NeRF is not being used just for the 3D color visual appearance, but also for like these semantic features. So that's where NeRF and Garfield fall in. And what these boards focus on is multi-scale features or scale conditions features, because this table, like just from like a small crop point of view, is like of texture, color, but from like a large point of view, it's like a part of the table. And we want our features to encompass that because it's kind of like if we if we were looking at like a small, like, because what we pay attention to depends on the scale of the scene.
So like if I'm like, I have a 3D reconstruction of like my living room or something.
Yeah.
I think you guys had a good one of like, I want to find my keys or something. And so you can like type in, I don't actually know how the interface works, but you type in like keys, like find my keys or whatever, and it'll highlight your keys. But depending on like the scale at which you're looking at something, like find my shoe rack, if your keys are on your shoe rack.
Then it should highlight the keys as well because it's kind of a part of the shoe rack. And that is like kind of the exact multi-scale understanding I'm talking about here. And I think you described it very nicely. Like over here, like this is like not just text, but it's also a part of the book. Right. And we want this point to be associated with two semantic features, which wasn't like really studied as much. Which was studied before, but I think how a lot of people do it is like there are like specific layers, like coarse, fine, medium, that kind of like exact levels. And what we focus on in NeRF and Garfield is we just add like an additional like scale, continuous number into like the MLP, and then we make that like we make it like a sliding scale instead of like this discrete level hierarchy.
I see. So like instead of defining like low level is like texture, medium level is
like object parts and like objects. We have a sliding scale that tries to deal with this automatically. Because I think it becomes unclear like when something is like an object part versus like an object when these like layers are supposed to end. Because you can have like a clutter of objects and you might want to group them together. Or like yeah, that yeah. Yeah, or like it's very arbitrary and like it feels really weird to like put like this like when should like
it's an interesting philosophical question of like when does a texture become a table or like
like ML has a lot more philosophy in it than most of computer science. There's a lot more like analogies to human intelligence and like all this sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm like not very good at explaining it.
I think you did well.
Yeah. But I think there's also very interesting philosophical questions of like if you have like two chopsticks together, if they should be like together or not together. And that's
What's your take? Should they?
Yeah.
I mean, my take is that like it really should depend on like what you're doing with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're like moving them around, then they should be grouped together. But like if you're like pushing them, they should be like not together because like for that task of pushing it, like they behave as different objects. But I don't know, we haven't like really studied it yet. It's something really I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I think it's like super sort of interesting to think about, like, I don't know if like primitives is the right word, but a lot of stuff I'm trying to now I can't explain it. Of like the level of abstraction that you want. Is this a table? Is this a chair? Are two chopsticks a thing?
Yeah.
I think I agree with you though. Like it's very task dependent.
Yeah.
But oftentimes users are not very good at like concretely defining what their task is.
Yes.
Right. So there's like I feel like in ML there's a lot of like you either are making a ton of assumptions about like what the task is, sort of based on like what is the average thing someone's interested in. And then there's also the other side of people being like ultimate customization. I guess kind of similar to like or something. Like that sort of dynamic.
Yeah, I think this kind of like ambiguity for semantics, I think, is something that we should continue to study. Which I guess in my previous in some of these previous works we've studied as like let's sort all these semantics by like the size of the objects. That's effectively what we did. But I think, given like for example what I said about the chopsticks, I think it's like it really shouldn't be like size dependent, but task dependent and some. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting thinking about like these philosophical questions and like brainstorming these with like other people. And I think being at Berkeley and talking with all these people about these like questions I care about and they also care about it is really fun.
You must be a big fan of the Bear Salon then.
I am.
Do you want to be a co-organizer? You want to lead one?
I think at some point in my life.
It would be an interesting salon topic, you know?
What is?
Like this, like, I don't know how exactly you would word it, but like, you know, how many assumptions should you be making? Stuff like that.
But I feel like sometimes the assumptions are necessary to get like some initial problem started and show that this is why it's interesting, but one day we want to remove the assumption. And I guess, I mean, sometimes it's like segment anything, right? I think it's like a really nice paper because it
Explain.
It's based given an image and then given a point, it outputs 3 different masks for like what this point might be trying to refer to. Like for example, if I had this Coke can and then I had a point on like the red panel or something, it might just include like the character, but also like the ball, also the can, and it kind of deals in it's interesting in that it deals with this like mask grouping ambiguity in that way, but it has a really strong assumption that a point can only belong to 3 different groups, or less, and it also has like a depending on how you take the image can also like affect its results as well. So, but it addresses an interesting problem, which I think it's good. But like, should those assumptions have been relaxed? Is like a whole different story. Because without those assumptions, it's possible this could have never been a paper, or at least not for a while.
Yeah.
What are some other areas you think people should work on more, either in ML or like in computer science as a whole?
I think, at least for ML, I think we need to figure out our relationship with the industry people. Like, I know that they have big models and big data, but if we keep also chasing big models and big data, why aren't we in industry?
Yeah.
Or that's something I'm still fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, it always feels like I'm like a dog, and like
not a robot.
No, like a dog that eats food, and like a big company with like a big model comes around once in a while and like puts in like the dog feeder, like here's a new big flashy model you can play with now, and then you play with it. And I think right now still like I think training like image models from scratch doable, video models from scratch it's like no longer becoming doable, and like this like dependent relationship with like the industry groups. I think it's good that like we're leveraging what we have and what we can do, but like if they stop out like open sourcing it, then like, what happens?
I mean, they've already stopped, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah, but that's true. But like, then what research do you do afterwards? Like, if you're so dependent on it.
What's your solution?
I don't have a solution. I'm just saying, like, this is something.
So, do you think, like, there are a lot of papers that like of academic groups that try to make open source versions of these large models, right?
Which
and
is nice.
Yeah. Which is really nice, and it's often like, I mean, let's be real, they're all much worse than the closed source ones because they just have less resources.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times there's and feel free to push back on this. I think there's like an argument that there's not a lot of novelty in these sorts of projects. Like the techniques that they're using, because like big data, big model tends to work really well.
Yeah.
They're papers that are like product papers. Like they're meant to produce this artifact of this model. And it is like kind of a grueling task, I would imagine, to try to make one of these models.
Yeah. But it feels weird because it then it's researchers that are trying to replicate these like big models in industry. Then like because you're only chasing after them, right? It really should be like one open source like in this one open source community that's trying to replicate. Wasn't Lucid Brains trying to do stuff like this? Or... But like they're always like
Brains does this, dude. That man. Are you familiar with this guy? Go on his GitHub and just look at his activity. This man makes like at minimum 10 commits a day consistently. The only time I saw that he made 0 commits was Christmas Day. Like it's insane. And you look at like the pull requests he does, like the amount of coding that he does in a day. Unbelievable.
Okay, I didn't know there was like one person. Now I know.
Oh yeah, I mean like a lot of people contribute to it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like build off of his work.
Yeah, but I feel like there should be like a big money backer against this, like, for it. I feel like.
Yeah.
And I feel like researchers should be involved in this as little as possible, but maybe that's wrong. Because if scaling is the end all to research, then maybe researchers should be researching how to scale up. But then it's the question of should these researchers exist in academia or in industry? And it's weird. I feel like it's weird. I feel like you would think about this more than I do.
I do think about this a lot. I think I do think about the question of what is the value in having a PhD student or multiple PhD students work towards creating a product? And kind of like, like what you're talking about, the line between like industry and academia, like what role does industry play? I've definitely shifted my research with the thought of open source models will never be as good. And I tend to focus my research on what I think will make like the most. I mean, impact is like a weird word, but people are going to use these closed source models, and people are probably not going to use these. Like they're going to use the closed source models much more than the open source models because they work. No shade, no tea to LMSys. But so in that setting, I think a lot of research should instead shift to this mentality of we don't know how this model works. And there, in my mind, are like at least two, probably many more distinct areas. There is how can I utilize these closed source models, knowing that they don't work. And I think a lot of that research, somebody's trying to do it, looks really stupid. Because you're not training a model, like you're just making a lot of calls to OpenAI. It often feels more like linguistics, like you spend a lot of your time figuring out like how do you prompt this model. And so it feels very like, is this even research? Like I don't even know. And then there's more the traditional research side, which is like, I think you can learn a lot about how these models learn. And kind of what they're doing by looking at smaller versions, which researchers can play with. And so, like, I see quite a large, like, and I think a lot of people do this, like, classic research direction of, like, trying to understand, like, scaling up, you know, how these models learn, things like that, at a smaller scale, which will probably transfer. I think this latter field, this, like, former field of, like, is this even research? Trying to figure out like things like researching feedback loops in large language models. What does that research actually look like? It's like you're prompting a language model a lot and like looking at the outputs. But it seems very like wishy-washy.
But I think it's like a good thing to look into from like an academic point of view, because people outside of research in industry or somebody will try to do it anyway, and I think it's like good to study it like systematically and scientifically, like at some point.
And a lot of that work is also like as soon as a new model comes out, it kind of doesn't apply. But like the models are coming out really fast right now, which makes it seem kind of it gets invalidated too quickly.
I think you probably think about this as well. And I'm sure, like, in general, researchers think about this. Like, in ML specifically, you want to make sure your research isn't, like, tied to one model, right? Because, a model will come out in a month. And honestly, probably, like, 3 days. And it might be invalidated. But there are some core components of, like, transformers or a model architecture that people use all the time. They've been using them since, depending on your field, like 2017 or something. Like, if I cater my method to be transformer specific, this might be fine. Like, this might at least have some amount of longevity. So I think it's, at least I spend a fair amount of time thinking, like, what components do I feel okay with tying my research to, such that like it doesn't immediately become obsolete? Which, to be fair, almost all my papers are completely obsolete. Maybe all of them. But
I mean, I think all of these papers have like still like a like a grand takeaway, right? That isn't like necessarily tied to a model. Maybe to like replicate it with like another model, it might be hard. Or it might take a lot of effort, but I feel like the core idea of, like, for example, like what you said about the feedback loop, I don't think that's necessarily going to be not a thing because there's like a new LLM. Because I mean, even humans have feedback loops, right? So I can't imagine an LLM wouldn't.
And I guess when thinking about like the role of industry, maybe in a slightly different direction, or like product-focused research. Like, I would say Angjoo's lab has a lot of, like, spends a lot of time on, like, marketing and, like, open source, you know, like, creating open source. Like, you guys have all these pretty videos that I'm, like, very impressed by. And so it seems like there is like a pretty strong focus on like, I don't know, productionization or like the accessibility maybe. I guess I'm wondering like, what do you think is like the right balance of that? Or like how much of your time do you spend doing like, you know, thinking about the problem, writing the paper, and then like the like marketing?
I don't think I think about the marketing too much. I think the pretty visuals come for free with the studio stuff.
I see.
So it's a little hard to say. And I think there is also an additional component of like 3D vision as a whole right now is extremely marketable. Like no matter what you do. Like so it
just comes for free.
It also I think partially comes for free. But I think projects also need to be marketed well for it to also be visible in the community right now because of all of this archive, Twitter, drama. Not drama, but like so many papers and like I feel like noticed like from like a year ago to now I feel like okay, I could be like biased, right? But I feel like papers they just come out looking like a whole product from the beginning get-go when they're archived. And their videos are like very Twitter curated. Like the kind of vibe, like it's very catchy, 10-second kind of thing that like these like archive influencers can like take for free and like just put it. And
archive influencers.
Yeah, and it puts like a really bad taste in my mouth sometimes that like researchers kind of have to care about that. But maybe that's just the life of it. And that's fine. And presentation matters because in the end, people like looking at well-presented work. Sorry, I kind of rambled a bit, but it's hard to reconcile these things, right? I feel like in my head, like an ideal researcher is like somebody that just cranks out really good work and like is really good at researching, right? But that's not necessarily a good researcher because they might not be a good communicator, or they might not be a good presenter, and that matters so much for like getting people to care about your work or like getting people to collaborate with you on your work. And I think I learned that being a personable person is very important for being a researcher in like the last few years.
So do you feel like you kind of had to change your personality's like the wrong word, but like I don't know, when you had this realization that like being personable, you know, like being likable, being whatever popular means is like pretty important, which is personable is like pretty important. Did that sort of change your approach in any way to like research or just to like life?
I think, well, I don't think I've necessarily changed as a person, like on like an active level. I feel like but I am slowly changing, I think. At least trying to be more present with people and talking more and like asking more about like their projects, trying to stay in with them as much as possible. But I also do know, like back in like I think like high school, I had like this whole thing where like I thought that like it or like similar vibes to what I just said, right? Like these people who are like really social and like they have like really good people skills, but like I was just like, oh, being good at math is so much more important than being like, and then having like people skills, right? And I think I like slowly, gradually, but also accelerated by like doing research, learned that people skills are just so much more important. And it's like really scary how much more it matters than like so many other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've changed as like how I act, but I've just like acknowledged the importance a lot more. And sometimes I get a little sad because that's definitely not what I'm good at.
Mhm.
And I think
I see. Yeah. Like I've been optimizing for the wrong thing.
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So how have you tried to sort of approach, like, if it's not something that comes super naturally to you, but it's something that you kind of want to get better at? I guess how do you sort of try to go about, improving your people skills?
I think there's a lot of opportunities in the PhD to improve your people skills. You'll always meet a lot of people. You'll always be forced to like talk about what you do in like a way that it is explainable, understandable to the other party. You'll also be prompted in like a lot of situations to talk about yourself or what you do, kind of like this. You'll also always be fighting kind of for the attention of like you kind of like why your project is important.
Right.
You'll always be convincing your advisor that your project is important. You'll always be like trying to convince like reviewers that like your thing is important. Like kind of, or you'll always be presenting about your work in like a way that like people can understand. And I think all in all, like it helps. It's a world where you have to build your soft skills or it's really hard to survive.
Mhm.
So in a way, by doing a PhD, I'm kind of acting on like this world of people skills matter in this like cold, cruel world.
Yeah. Do you think that getting people skills or do you think your people skills have improved since you've started your PhD?
Oh, by far,
Okay.
definitely. I was such a terrible presenter.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm still like pretty bad at talking, but it was so much worse.
I remember you gave a talk at the Stanford Berkeley.
Oh, but that was like extremely rehearsed, and like I think
that's fine.
Yeah, but I think working on the NeRF project changed a lot about how I see research as a whole. But like, just like talking, presenting, motivating your problem, all of that. That was really hard. That was really bad. I also had like still kind of do, but like presentation anxiety. Like, I think something that's also important is like when somebody asks you a question in the middle of your presentation, then it's like hard twofold because like one is you have to understand the question, and this might be also hard based on like how well you presented the work, because they might be extremely confused and asking like the wrong question. Then two is like actually answering the question, which is also hard, but that's also a really important soft skill.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where I was going with it, but like we're just pushed in so many these different objectives to become better people, social people.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of these skills like kind of don't come up outside of the PhD. Like just like going through undergrad or working in industry, you wouldn't have to give a lot of presentations about your work or like go to conferences and talk to a bunch of strangers. So there's skills that you kind of don't practice much before.
Yeah, I think what my dad told me, he also does a PhD, and he was like very happy that he did his PhD. But something he told me was like, it's like a very accelerated social soft skills program. If you think about it, like you do research, but like a lot of the soft skills that you will come out with after your PhD is like maybe your PhD is like 4 or 5 years, right? That's probably like worth like 10, 15 years of your like industry soft skill times. Just because you'll be just stretched in so many different ways more and like such a intensity that you will have to learn it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this like is your experience may vary kind of thing, but I think I kind of agree with it. Definitely would not have I would still definitely have like a big presentation anxiety.
So, I guess if you didn't do a PhD, like assuming that you didn't need these soft skills for your PhD, are you like glad that your soft skills have gotten better? Just like, do you feel like it's like increased your mood, independent of like this is good for my career, or do you feel
like a PhD is good for my career?
Not a PhD, but like the soft skills that you need to obtain, of like presenting well, maybe being a bit more like outgoing or things like that. Do you feel like that will benefit you beyond your PhD? Even if you're not doing research.
Right. I think being able to. I'm not that good with. I think if I were good at talking with new people, that's a very important skill for like. If I'm trying to socialize at a new party or trying to get like incorporated into like a new group that I'm working with, that's like a very transferable skill. Trying to confidently describe what you're working on, even if you feel like extremely imposter syndrome-y about your work.
Yeah, that's also a very useful skill.
I've given some very bad explanations of what I work on over the years.
And yeah, I think that's really nice. I think I also forgot your original question.
No, I think you answered it.
That's just how I feel. I feel like I definitely did not have some of these skills before. Definitely did not like talking to other people as much. Definitely wasn't as interested in like topics as much. Or definitely didn't like study stuff as much. Definitely didn't describe stuff as much. Definitely didn't talk to people as and it's just such an interesting experience. And I like to think that this is like a way to live long because there's always these new stimuli that makes your time go slower. So I like to think that I'm aging slower.
Nice.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's correct. So, have you ever, I guess something I've experienced that I am currently very bad at and trying to work on is, I think the PhD pushes you a lot, especially like, socially and stuff like that. And there's a lot of advantage to like being likable. But you also still want to be really productive and things like that. And I found that it has led to like a lot of compromise of boundaries of like people will ask a lot and I will feel like I need to do it just to like get these people to like me or to like feel productive. And I feel like my boundaries when starting the PhD actually got worse.
Oh, really?
Of like working a lot, which a lot of PhD students do, but like if someone asked me to do something, even if I was super busy, I would like feel the need to do it. Or like if a new person asked me for like kind of a large favor, I would feel like, oh, I need to make this connection, so I need to do it. And even if sometimes their asks were like unrealistic, or sometimes like they even just like made me kind of uncomfortable, like I would.
Like someone's like, "Do you want to start a podcast?" And you're like, "Shit."
Yeah, exactly. Did you ask to start it? Yeah. I mean, luckily this wasn't a boundary, but I'm trying to think of like a specific example that would be like interesting.
I feel like a PhD should like ideally make your boundary setting easier, or in like a understanding where your boundary is, because maybe this is like what I personally think, but I think whether people like you or not doesn't necessarily depend on how many favors you do for them, but how many favors you take on that you can actually execute on them without you getting stressed out on like the stress. So I feel like, or at least I thought you were pretty good at that.
I mean, I'm glad you think that.
But I also know that you have a lot on your plate.
I've definitely gotten better. It is definitely a result of me like completely, like, maybe crying in front of multiple of my superiors. Like it was definitely, I feel like, out of necessity of like drawing stronger boundaries. And then part of it is also like, I don't know, as you get to know more people, as you get to take up more responsibility, at some point you objectively are like, I can't fulfill all these requests. Whereas I feel like there's often a line of like, I could work 60 hours this week. But then it's like, oh, people are asking me for a collective 100 hours of work. Like, it's time to start cutting stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a lesson I learned in industry after a while, but it helped a lot. I think, like, coming to the PhD, already having had to say no to a lot of requests from people.
Yes.
Yeah, like, people just want 200 hours a week worth of stuff from you, and it can't happen. So.
Yeah. I think a lot of the reason why I maybe might come across as that is I feel like in my undergrad specifically, when I started research, I made like quite a strong effort to come off as very self-confident and like very assertive, which I found very uncomfortable, but in just a research context, I was kind of okay with, of like, really like asking questions, maybe like pushing back on some ideas or like proposing new ideas was definitely like hard or foreign, but like I could do it pretty easily. But then like when it came to like personally or like interpersonal relationships, like a one-on-one, I could not, sort of get that. But because I do think that, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on this. I do feel like coming off is very, like, you can walk all over me, like, very, like, I don't know, I feel like mild-mannered or, like, pretty timid. I feel like sometimes people will kind of exploit that, or people sort of view you a different way. And I do think gender maybe has a bit of... like things to do with that. But I don't know if you've experienced any of this.
I feel like I'm not very good at this. But
we also don't have to talk about it.
Yeah, but I think maybe I wouldn't say this on a recorded setting. But I do think it does affect. I do agree with you that a lot of things will affect how other people will perceive you, such as your personality and other factors. And that will also affect how other people interact with you as compared to other people around you. And I think, in a way, that's kind of understandable, but very unhappy at the same time.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but that's why. But having a good personality that is like very confident is very important for your personal skills.
True.
You just gotta practice in the mirror, like, I'm great, I'm killing
positive affirmation.
Yeah, like, I feel like Angjoo is like, I think, very good at like doing that.
Angjoo is. I really respect Angjoo in that. I mean, in obviously multiple ways, but she is. For those who haven't met Angjoo, I would say she's very, I don't know if feminine's the right word. Like, she has a high-pitched voice. She, like, gets very excited, almost like a childlike excitement a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And she really doesn't try to, like, hide this, I think, things that would be considered, like, not super in the mold of, like, cold, like, calculated, analytical. But she's so self-confident, and like she still, when she needs to be, like she'll get excited, but if she doesn't get it, or like she disagrees, she'll tell you, like pretty readily. And I've always really respected how, like, I always saw her as like a authority figure, and like someone that like you need to pay attention to. But without the, like, terror that I will get with some other professors.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah.
But that's a very admirable factor for her.
Yeah. But you also are now advised by Angjoo.
That's
You were
very
not
nice.
advised previously, if I am remembering correctly.
Yeah, I was sole advised by Ken for a while.
How did you sort of decide, this is what, I might want to be advised by her, and then did you, have, a conversation about it? I feel like it can be nerve-wracking to, try to have
it was, a natural progression, mostly. I worked on, some of these projects with her, and, it was, I wanted to do more of these, 3D, vision stuff, and I think it just made more sense to... I was also effectively pseudo in her group when we had the discussion as well. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a sudden, I was suddenly in her group. Yeah. But it's very nice. Mm-hmm. Her group is very nice. The people are very excited about what they do.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people out there who are earlier in their careers than you, people thinking about doing a PhD or early researchers?
As the days are coming up.
Yeah. Doing a PhD is really fun. If the people around you are very fun. It's the equivalent of if you're in a company, but maybe you don't like the company as much, but you like your coworkers, so you really like your work. People really do decide what your experience is like, so vet your people correctly.
Yeah.
But on that factor, Berkeley is a really nice place to be because there's so many good people that you can always hang out with. Because it's an open office environment. At least Bear is a very open office environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sky too. It's great. It's definitely the best part.
I feel like Sky feels more like a cubicle-like environment. It's very
Bro, you trapped on Sky? It's more silly.
There's no plush animals.
This is true.
Oh, I have an otter at my desk.
Yeah.
I see. But have you seen a Costco bear?
This is true. I have been meaning to redecorate.
Yeah, I know that you guys have a big gummy bear.
We have a ton of them.
Yeah.
But yeah. So you're the one who started this, right?
I got the bear.
Yeah, in Bear, we have a very large Costco bear.
Yeah. Actually, on my Instagram, I post the bear many times.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Damn. Wow, I should follow that.
Yeah.
But so me and another PhD student, Susie, were like, this looks fun. And so we bought a stuffed sheep and named it Dolly after the image generation model. And then we started every day moving Dolly in different parts of the lab. Yeah. And then one day I come in and Dolly is moved, but I didn't move it. And Susie didn't move it. And I was like, we've started. That stopped for a while because Dolly ended up on the rafters of the building. So I don't know how anyone got it up or down. But then we've recently added Freebie, the llama, named after the llama model, which is free. But
but we have a raccoon now. We also have a beaver.
Yeah. Is the beaver a play on MIT? What's the beaver?
I didn't get the beaver.
Oh, okay.
I also got a frog recently.
Oh, right, yes.
Should I switch labs? This sounds so good.
So here's the thing. I was going to bring this to Sky, but you should switch labs for sure. And we can all become 3 desk neighbors, actually.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of retheming Sky to petting zoo. So we would get all these stuffed animals that are for all the models and all the methods. I think I even asked everyone in Sky to give me method names or popular methods that are animals. And there are a ton. There's all the
alpaca koala.
Yeah, alpaca koala, llama, vicuña. I'm sure there are 45 others in machine learning. Then there was like an orca, there were some other random ones and other
Pandas for data science.
pandas, yes. I'll add this squirrel, which I don't really understand. Is it a chinchilla? Chinchilla, another model and popular systems thing. But so I was gonna get, this is maybe would require a bit of funding, but like stuffed animals of all of these. And then we all have a little pen.
Do you guys have a space for a pen?
We'll make one. And then maybe we'll just put it in the main room. But then we need like little jokes for all of them, like little puns, things like that. And then I was considering trying to find a freelance artist to then paint like, you know, like a farm barn scene on the main meeting room doors. Like, washable paint, but
It's a strong theme. Wow. The current theme is Candyland in the lab.
But I feel like our decor has gotten like more and more, like more.
Oh yeah, every
It's
time.
gotten better every time. So we're like, Candyland is pretty good. But I feel like Joey has requested that our decorations actually mean something research-wise. So I feel like,
it is like a machine learning model theme.
yeah. Well, that's why I was hoping to get other. I don't want to be too ML heavy, so getting other like system security database stuff.
There's lots of animal databases.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I feel like it could work out. We could have different areas, different pens
like-
for all the different
Like
fields.
a model area, database area. Something.
The hope is that in my ideal world, we would have like a machine learning one, like one for each of the fields, and then I would get like Jan, Joey, Matei, Raluca to pose with their respective Natasha, Joe. You know, then we could get a nice lineup of like the farmers with their.
I thought you said you were going to say that you were going to make stuffed animals of all of them.
Not quite there. I feel like, you know, that
I
might
like
be
that.
crossing a boundary, if you will.
They're the farmers. I like that.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I guess we're coming up on we're past an hour and a half.
That's like the longest pod I've ever done.
Yeah.
Wow.
You're that good?
That's great.
Is there any parting wisdom you'd like to give of PhD research, 3D vision, being social? Anything you wish we didn't ask? We would have asked you.
I think doing a PhD has helped me introspect a lot about my life and what I want to do and what I enjoy in my life. Really thinking about myself, and I don't take it for granted. And I think without my PhD, it would have taken me longer to think about it. So that's why you should do a PhD.
Wow.
Wow. Strong advocate for the PhD.
Sponsored by PhDs.
Straight up.
All right.